everyone. My name is Vili, and it's a pleasure being here with you today. I've been in project management in IT for the past 8 to 10 years, usually hardware development, delivery, Internet of Things, software development, among many others. I love my job, I love working with engineers, and I hope that you're going to enjoy the session today. So today we're going to talk about the Spotify approach. How many of you are using Spotify? Everyone? Yeah. How many of you have heard of the Spotify approach? A few people here and there. It's going to be fun. Okay, then. So in the agile world, if you're in software development, chances are that you're doing some form of agile. In most companies, it's Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban, and plenty other variations. And what companies often do is that they try agile, and usually before that, they were doing waterfall, and it was very cumbersome, very difficult process. So when they start with agile, they start with a few teams, and it's working, and they get fast results and feedback, and the product is developing pretty quickly. And at some point, they decide that it's time to scale, it's time to do something more and to grow. And what they do is they try different frameworks. We have Less, we have Safe, Nexus, Scrum at Scale, and plenty others. And inevitably, someone will say, let's try the Spotify approach. And if you're like me, the first time I heard that, it was from a client, and I said, okay, let me analyze our environment and decide if it's suitable for us. And by analyze, I meant Google it, because I had no idea what that was. Once I analyzed it, I realized that although it is a good approach and it might be working for some companies, it's not applicable in many environments. And I also realized that there aren't while there is information on the internet about it, many companies, they just want to follow Spotify's lead. It's not about the approach, they want Spotify success. And Spotify, it was founded in 2006. They have over 400 million users and nearly 200 million subscribers. They had a fast success. Over the first few years, they created a revolution in the music industry. And they're available in nearly every country in the world. So if you're like me, you're not a Spotify employee, you hear that you might implement the Spotify approach, and you start Googling and searching for information. I was lucky enough to work for a client who actually implemented the approach, so in addition to the research I've had on the topic, I've also seen it implemented. So this is the Spotify approach, like the overview of the Spotify approach. We have tribes, chapters, guilds, squads, and we'll go through each of these levels and explain what is the basics of the Spotify model. Let's start by saying that how the Spotify model was developed. Spotify started as a startup. They started using Scrum. They had different squads. At some point, the company grew exponentially, and they needed additional practices, additional events to align all of these teams together. And about 10 years ago, they released a white paper that was discussing all of these practices. And by white paper, I don't mean a detailed guide on how to do it yourself. It's pretty much like the Scrum guide, 10 to 15 pages with pictures, so it's actually less. And based on that, a lot of companies decided to emulate them. Starting from the lowest level of the structure, we have a squad, and a squad is like a typical Scrum team. They act like a mini startup, they're cross-functional, they're self-organized. Usually we have less than 10 developers because we want people to communicate. In each of these squads, we would have a Scrum Master or a coach, and we would have a product owner who is responsible for the prioritization of the backlog and deciding what features are we going to build. Unlike typical Scrum, here we have feature squads, meaning that the squad is developing only one area. It can be payments, it can be profile development, it can be registration, let's say. And we have different squads developing these different features. The squads are like a mini startup in the sense that they can experiment. Similarly to Google, here you would have some time that is spared for experimentation, for pet projects. Like Gmail was a pet project of one of the developers, and they decided to invest more into it. In Spotify, some of the features have been developed as an idea from a developer. And they would have this spare time, they would invest in it, then release it to production, get some real feedback, and if the feedback was positive, they'll discuss it with the team and invest more into that feature. Additionally, each team would decide what is the appropriate framework that they're going to use. It might be Scrum, it might be Kanban. It doesn't really matter as long as it's something that is applicable for the team. For example, if you're doing more infrastructure support work, you can't really plan all of your work in advance. It doesn't make sense to have sprint planning and all of the other Scrum activities. Maybe Kanban would be the best approach for you. In addition, we have these different squads, but they also have to collaborate. In a squad, we might have a couple of front-end developers, a couple of back-end developers, a couple of QAs, designer, let's say. So these developers, although they communicate with each other, it's different when you can communicate with people with similar background to yours. I had a team where we had only one backend developer in the team. And of course, he would talk to everybody in the team and exchange ideas, but it was good when he could talk to other backend developers for the project as a whole. That's why we have the chapters. The chapter is essentially a community of practice. It is, can you see my mouse? No, you can't. So it is horizontal and it runs across different squads. You can have a .NET chapter, a Java chapter, iOS, Android chapter. The chapter, unlike the squad, they wouldn't meet every day. They would meet once a week or once every couple of weeks. And they would also have a chapter lead. The chapter lead is somebody who is leading the chapter, but they're not purely in a management role. They also sit within the team, which means that this person would dedicate half of their time developing features that the team is working on, and half of their time would be developing and growing the chapter expertise, hiring, having typical line management activities. It's good when you're implementing the approach to have this in mind when deciding who is going to be the chapter lead and not make one of the many mistakes management makes, appointing the most senior developer into that role, because a lot of developers, they want to solve technical problems. They don't want to deal with people and hiring and all the other boring management stuff. And that is my experience in the company that was using the Spotify approach. They started out as a startup. They quickly grew. Initially, it made sense that the most senior person is the chapter lead. But as the company grew, their responsibilities grew, and some of them realized that this is not what they want to do. So they had to restructure and appoint new people in these positions. Not all of them, but some of them didn't want to. As a chapter, as I mentioned, you'd meet once a week or once every couple of weeks, and you're going to discuss how your discipline is developing. You discuss the code quality, you discuss, for example, the number of approvals needed for a merge request, what are the best practices that you're going to use. When you're doing this remotely, and let's face it now, most of us are doing this remotely, it's good to have a chapter channel or any type of platform where you can communicate with people. Doing this remotely makes things a bit difficult. In that client of mine, they had people from 40 different countries. Luckily, the time zones would align, but still you have to find time and space to talk with people. So a platform, a channel, would help with that. Also, the chapter would help with cross-team communication because it's easier to ask something from another team when you know somebody from your chapter who works there. In addition to that, we have tribes, guilds. So the tribe, that would be a combination of squads, a combination of teams that are working on a bigger picture, on a bigger feature. That's not something that you should start with unless you have plenty of people working in the same area. A tribe usually consists of 100 to 150 people. That is a lot of people. That is, if we say that a squad is about 10 people, that is 10 to 15 squads at most. The client that I was working with, they started thinking about tribes about a year and a half into the product development. One thing that is essential when creating tribes, you have to minimize cross-team dependencies. Of course, you're going to have dependencies, that's inevitable, you're working on the same product, but you should carefully align the teams and make sure that there aren't any major blockers in their work. A guild, on the other side, is a community of interest. It's similar to the chapter, but it's different in the sense that while in a chapter you have experts in the field, .NET developers, Java developers, in a guild, you can have anybody who has interest in that discipline. Let's say we have an Agile guild. You can have, of course, Scrum Masters and Agile coaches. You can have product owners who want to contribute to the best practices in the company and share their expertise. You can have QAs who are maybe unhappy with the process and want to suggest some improvements. You can have people from the whole company joining. We have two distinct roles in the Spotify model, and we have chief architect and system owner. The chief architect is very self-explanatory. This is a person who will be responsible for the overall architecture and architectural decision. The chief architect can work and reach out to anybody within the squads, but they usually work with the chapter leads. The idea here is that the chapter leads are representing the chapter and therefore every squad. The system owner is somebody who is responsible for a particular system. We had that in a previous project. We call them repo owners in our case, and we would have somebody who is responsible for each repository. It didn't mean that that person is personally approving each pull request, but they would be looking for the overall quality of the repository. It is similar in that case. They would have somebody who is looking for the overall quality and health of a particular system. And the biggest level, the largest level of the Spotify approach is an alliance, which is a combination of different tribes. Again, a tribe is between 100 and 150 people. Alliance is up to 300 and more people. Spotify, they didn't start out having alliances and tribes and all of this. They started with simple Scrum. They saw that at some point it's not working for them, and they started adding layers to ensure that they have alignment within the teams. There is an amazing video on YouTube that I highly recommend, and it's about the Spotify engineering culture. And here you're going to see some of the elements that I particularly like. They have small and frequent releases. Releasing should be easy, it should be business as usual, it shouldn't take too much time. I had a client who wanted to try Spotify. Their release process, as planned, took 2 weeks, and usually it was 3 weeks and a few hotfixes. Obviously, Spotify wasn't for them at that point. You have to ensure that you have in the infrastructure, the knowledge, to make releasing easy. You should have decoupled releases. Spotify didn't start out with decoupled releases. Now every piece of their platform can be released alone, but in the very beginning they started with a monolith structure because, again, they started with Scrum, they had very few teams, and it wasn't a problem. But at some point when they had a lot of teams, for your team to wait for the whole system to be released, it was very difficult, and it created a bottleneck. So they invested time to do decoupled releases. They also have self-service model, which means that on one side we have client app teams. These are teams that enable releases on particular platform, let's say iOS, Android, whatever, and we have infrastructure squads. The idea of the infrastructure squads is not to release everything for the teams. Each team should have the expertise to release within their squad, but they enable them. They provide tools, they take care of the overall infrastructure, and they provide knowledge. They also have the idea of the so-called limited blast radius. If you take a look on the first row, the third user is not quite happy because something is not working for that user, but overall the system is working. So even if something breaks, it usually doesn't break for everyone. Another good practice that they use is the A/B testing. If they want to test something, they can release it to a particular subset of users, gather their feedback, and then decide if the feature is useful or not. And that again relates to the innovation, the time that developers can spend developing their own ideas and testing them in production with real users. And as we mentioned, release management, they use release trains and feature toggles. So they know exactly when the next release is. Let's say it's at the end of the first week, and then we have another in a couple of weeks' time. They're developing, in this example, features A, B, and C, and feature D. Features A, B, and C, they're done, they're ready, but we have also committed some code for feature D. Instead of cherry picking and making it all difficult, everything goes to production, but feature D is going to be turned off. So we can still see all the integration issues, but it's not visible to end users. And when the next release train arrives, feature E and D are now complete. We have some of the functionalities for feature F done. Everything goes to production, and in that case, we turn on feature D and turn off feature F. Something that is not in the white paper, but I've seen shared online and in that client who implemented Spotify, are scaled events. And one of them is planning or quarterly planning. Why do you need planning? Because you have feature teams, and although each team is developing their own feature, you don't want to end up with a Frankenstein of a product. At the end, the end user doesn't care that you're doing payments and the user profile sucks. They care about the overall feel of the application. And that's why you need to have communication between the teams, and chapters to an extent do that. So every year, most companies would decide what are their objectives for the year. And then because we are agile, every 3 months we would have smaller objectives that we can deliver together. The whole event, the way I've seen it, was done remotely. It was a 2-day event, and you had everybody from C-level management to developers in the same meeting. And I remember the first time I was in one of these events, my first thought ever was, gosh, that is a very expensive meeting, and I didn't see the point of it. Until maybe a week after the event, I realized that I was looking through it from the perspective of my team. And our team, they were doing well. We've delivered everything that we had to deliver. We talked to some of the teams we had dependencies on, but that wasn't the case for every team. So the event was, in fact, very useful. How it starts? We start with a vision. The vision can be top features that you want to develop in the next 3 months. It can be objectives and key results. But it should be something that is guiding you as to what you want to deliver. What is the current state where we currently are? And what is the desired state where we want to go? The event starts by usually somebody from management who shares that visions with the team, where we want to go, and what we've currently achieved. And then we have different briefings. We would have the chief architect who would share the state of the architecture, different tools that we are using or planning on using. We would have designers sharing the vision for the product owners giving a high-level overview of the product roadmap. We would have the chapter leads sharing some challenges or successes. That usually takes about half a day. Then we have lunch, of course. And then each of the squads would have their own space to develop their plan. Assuming in this example we have different squads and 6 sprints, six sprints for 3 months, 2 weeks. If you're doing this remotely, you have your own breakout room, and everybody can jump from one breakout room to the next. If you're doing this in a physical space, like everybody would have a corner, and you can approach them if you have questions. The idea of the team is to create a high-level plan of what they want to achieve in the next 3 months. And by high-level plan, I don't mean that you take each individual JIRA ticket and decide in sprint 1 we are doing 1 to 10, and then 11 to 20, etc. It would be like in sprint 1, we want to focus on registration. In sprint 2, we want to start two-factor authentication, etc., etc. It's just a high-level view of what you want to deliver. But then when you go into the actual sprint planning, you're going to pick out the individual JIRA tickets on how to help you achieve that particular feature, that particular goal. When you're doing that, you inevitably see that you have dependencies with other teams. So towards the end of the day, you might hop into another breakout room and talk to people. And this is not product owner to product owner conversations, this is developer to developer conversations. Of course, you would have your product owner with you to ensure that they clarify what is the priority of that particular feature, but it is you talking to another developer on how to achieve that, how to remove that dependency, when is the best time to do it, depending on the work that you're currently doing. These dependencies, they have to be mapped. As you can see in the picture, there are also threads going from one dependency to another. Why do we need to identify the dependencies? Because you may say that you're developing feature A in your 6th sprint because it's not important to you right now, but you realize that it is blocking another team, so you have to push it forward, let's say in sprint 2. So these are the kinds of conversations that are happening on these meetings. At the end of the first day, usually the product owner of each team would present a high-level plan of what are the features that they're going to develop for the next 3 months. At the end of that, we have a confidence vote. The confidence vote, if you're doing it remotely, can be anonymous. If you're doing it in a physical room, obviously it's not anonymous. Everybody can see everyone's vote. It's 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. At the end of the first day, especially at the first event, you're probably going to see a lot of 1s, 2s, and 3s. People are not very confident that what they've heard, what they've developed is going to work. And that is completely fine. That's why we have the second day. When everybody votes, you can share your feedback, why you believe that something is not sustainable, why do you believe that the plan is not going to work. The power here is that you have management, you have C-level executives, you have all of the decision makers, and they can see what are the problems that you're facing. It's not something that like management has the plan and then development has to deliver it. You're all in the same room and everybody can see what the problems are. So at the end of the second day, we have the already completed plan, and we have a short retrospective. The retrospective is about how the event went, because in the beginning you're going to face challenges. It's probably not going to be the most effective meeting. You have to have a few iterations to perfect it. So we want to gather this feedback. The retrospective here is not 2 hours long, it's 15 to 20 minutes. Everybody either uses sticky note or whatever collaboration tool you're using, doing this remotely. In our case, that was Miro. It can be anything else, as long as it's interactive, as long as you can see the changes happening as somebody is making them. At the end of the day, we also have a second vote of confidence, and ideally by that time, the confidence should be 2, 3, 4, or 5. 5 is maybe too optimistic, but like in the upper case of the scale. Something very important that I saw a client implement was a product showcase. What is the difference between a product showcase and a sprint review? During a sprint review, again, remember, we have feature teams. You're showing your feature, and of course, you've made sure that your feature is working, like it's your sprint review. But then you have to show on a product showcase, in our case, how the whole product is working. So you're showing a whole flow. how a user is registering, creating a profile, doing payment, or like different functions. So you can see easily what are the pain points between different teams and what you have to work on. This again helps you avoid the silos. It is very culture-driven, the whole model. I would often be asked whether it is a model or a culture. I would say kind of both. It's not a model or framework in the sense that it's not like Scrum or SAFe. You don't have guidelines. You don't have steps on how to implement it. You have a white paper and a lot of stories online on people who've tried to implement it. So in that sense, it's not a model. And you don't have certification. Not that certification would make it a model, but when you have a certificate, let's say a .NET certificate, if you have it and you have it, chances are you have the same knowledge because it's standardized. It's the same thing you're learning from the same textbook. On Spotify, you don't have that. It is very culture-driven in the sense that they have created a culture of innovation, a culture where everybody could share their feedback, their ideas, and they're heard by everybody. So if you're coming from a very traditional, very waterfall background, for example, banks, like, can you really blame them that they're very traditional? They have been around for centuries. Of course, they're very standardized. They're in a very regulated environment. For them, it's very difficult to leave all of the decisions to a particular team. And that makes sense. So it's kind of both. One thing that is often overlooked, you'd hear opinions online that even Spotify doesn't use Spotify. And probably if you take a look into that white paper, of course they're not doing the same thing. Like, it was 10 years ago. Would you expect that company that grew so much to use the same practices that they used 10 years ago? Of course not. There is an overlooked statement towards the end of the white paper that says, by the time you're reading this, things have already changed because they are innovating all the time. You should focus on less informal processes and you should have more faith in your teams and your developers. That's why I believe that it's easier if you're a startup to start implementing the approach because you're building it from the bottom up. You don't have all of these existing frameworks and processes and procedures. You don't need a whole mindset change. You should have more autonomy in the teams and less top-down management. If a decision is going to affect operations, if a decision is going to affect the teams, then the teams have the most knowledge to make the right decision. You should create value over business. The idea here is that instead of having a goal to increase sales, you should have a goal to increase user experience, and that in turn is going to increase all other parameters. You should minimize dependencies between teams. If you're blocked every step of the way, chances are that you're going to be frustrated and you're not going to be productive at all. So you have to be very mindful on how you divide the teams. And according to them, productivity is a formula between effort, competence, environment, and motivation. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen it. There is a screenshot from I think, HR email from Spotify a few years ago, and it was something in the lines of, they had a survey, employee satisfaction survey, and the email was, although 98% of all employees are happy with our company, we don't think that this is good enough. We are asking all of the 2% that are not happy or think that something should be improved to come to us or give us feedback because we want to make sure that you're happy with the company. And then that is a kind of culture that not a lot of workplaces have. They want to create a space that is inclusive of everybody. Defining what awesome looks like, unlike Scrum, they don't have definition of ready, they don't have definition of done, they have definition of awesome. So when they're thinking of a feature, they're thinking of what would be really cool. If you're a user using Spotify, what would you like to see? What is exciting? And something else that they use, and I think that this is applicable in any environment, is the team health check. The categories are the same every time. You do it once every 3 months, and you compare the results. You do it for every team. So the categories are teamwork. Do we work well together? Pawns or players? Do we believe that we make the decisions, or we are just pawns in the hands of somebody? Do we know what is our mission, what we are here to deliver? What is the health of our code base? Are we doing something good, or is it very difficult? What is the speed of delivery? Is it easy to deliver something, or it takes weeks and weeks and weeks? Is it easy to release? Is it easy to commit code? Are we learning anything, or we feel that we are stuck and we are using the same old thing over and over again? Do we believe that we are delivering value, that what we deliver matters to anyone? Do we have a sustainable process, or are we overworking and overspending and it's going nowhere? And are we having fun? And you have these three levels, yellow, green, and red. And you can see from each quarter to quarter whether it changes. So the first one, we have teamwork, and it's red. Then we see that we've made some improvements, and it's yellow. These are really easy indicators. You can use them every time. It doesn't take more than, I would say, 30 minutes. Like for the voting, it's actually less, but if you want to discuss the results afterwards, it's going to probably take 30 minutes to an hour. And you want to agree on next steps. What are the things that you want to try out in a typical agile fashion? So should you try it? Don't copy the model. Tailor it to your environment. Like, it doesn't make sense to copy something that has been shared over 10 years ago. And there are many companies that have tried to copy-paste it, and it doesn't work. Put emphasis on trust and building strong relationships in the team and among team members. Empower teams and people. Experiment and test what actually works, not what you believe that should work. And expect mistakes, because you're going to see mistakes anyway. And with that, if you have any questions. Yep.
Thank you. So one question from my side. Currently, I'm working in a company that is trying or is adopting the Spotify model. And I've noticed one thing, and I want to ask you about your knowledge, your experience, because we have also coding of practice for different chapters. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that a lot of people like to hear about new things, like to learn something new, but it's really hard to, activate people to share the knowledge. And so basically it may look like that you've got a meeting, okay, let's share the knowledge and during the chapter, but everything is there. Maybe there was an agenda or not, but no one is happy or no one is eager to share the knowledge with different people. They want to only take, not only to give. And who should be the moderator responsible for that, to maybe a chapter lead, or maybe not, maybe somebody else? Or we shouldn't force the people to share knowledge if they don't want to.
Okay, a few answers. Maybe the chapter lead, if that person is not experienced in that or doesn't feel very comfortable in that new role, you can have an agile coach help you with that. They are usually very good at facilitating meetings and helping people get to talk. You definitely shouldn't make people share knowledge if they don't feel comfortable. And that's why I mentioned that it's about the culture and environment change. Because in the beginning, let's face it, if you are trying to implement it right now, it means that you had something very different before that. So it takes time for people to transition from one mindset to the next. And if you have a few people who are willing to share knowledge, then it's good for them to give that example and to ask other people. It's also good if you have a list of topics that you can share knowledge on, And you can then find out what are the experts in these fields and ask them if they're willing to have a short presentation. But it's easier when you have concrete topics, because then you know who is the person who can share that knowledge. Otherwise, it's just like, let's share knowledge. Okay, but what kind of knowledge? Who is going to do it? And of course, nobody's going to do it because they don't know what that means.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm interested in the chart you showed where there was the team check, the team health check. What happens after that? Is there a conversation with like the chapter leaders or product owners which lead the teams? What is the result of that green, yellow, red?
How I've done it, I usually use it for a retrospective. In the beginning of a retrospective, we will do the voting and we will identify what the issues are in terms of red, amber, green. After that, I would ask people to share their opinion. In the beginning, it's difficult because you have to create an environment of trust where people know that they can share their issues with you. Once you have concrete steps, for instance, in one of our cases, it was difficult to release or difficult to commit code because every time you had 3 or 4 approvers for a code, we had people from different countries, different working times, and you'd have a pull request sitting there for hours. So in that case, we started a discussion within the chapter, and we decided that we're going to have a maximum of 2 approvers and like a specified process on how to deal with that. So it really depends on the topic. Once we do the voting, we then specify the steps. It might include, if we see that, for example, within the sprint, we change a lot of time the work that we are doing, we would have a discussion with the product owner, who is, by the way, part of that meeting as well. And if we see that we are adding mid-sprint work on dependencies with other teams, we might start a discussion with them to see if we can predict these dependencies in advance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hey.
I wanted to ask, are there any success stories about companies which were in one state and transformed into Spotify model? Or, I mean, I'm looking for tips how to successfully transform a company from one state to the Spotify model.
There are some. I don't think that there is a clear-cut yes or no answer. They had their ups and downs, but there are companies that are sharing positive feedback. All of the positive experiences, they said that they didn't implement everything. They started with squads and chapters. In some cases, they would create temporary guilds, for instance, a quality assurance guild to make sure that the quality of the product is in place, and then they would dissolve the guild.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. Have you ever heard, or can you even imagine, a huge corporate company, let's say more than 100K employees, successfully transferring to a Spotify model?
From my experience and what I've heard from colleagues, usually big corporations, they try to implement SAFe, because SAFe, you have different levels. You have enterprise level, you have large company level, and you have a implementation roadmap. You know the exact steps. So if you're here, you follow this path. If you're here, you follow this path. I think it would be very difficult for a corporate, huge, established, mature company to try the Spotify model. I believe ING did try it, and you can read about their experience. It's pretty funny.
Thank you.
Hello. You briefly mentioned the role of the chief architect. Can you explain what is this role in the Spotify model? if it's any special to...
I wouldn't say that it's any special that anything you have in a normal company. This is the person who is ultimately responsible for the architectural decisions in the company. In my client, they did have a chief architect, but they also had like support functions. So it was more like a committee of architects that would make all of the decisions. So they would vet any other new tools that they would be using. Nothing particularly special than like a normal chief architect.
Okay, so then maybe I have some like practical question. In the previous job, there was this chief architect, but anytime we wanted to discuss anything, they did not want to do any decisions. So
No, that role, they should be empowered to make all of the technical decisions that, not only empowered, but they're the person responsible to making all the technical decisions. You can have discussions with them, you can have suggestions, but ultimately this is the person who says yes or no.
and they attend all the sessions like this quarterly.
The quarterly meetings, yes. They might be invited to some chapter meetings. You can have one-on-one discussions with them if you have a particular suggestion, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello again. Related to what the guy just said. From the diagram, I remember that the chief architect is someone outside the vertical line, don't remember the name, the squad. So does it attend all the meetings of all the squads in order to understand what are the features which are being developing in that moment? Or
I didn't get the name of the role. Which role?
Chief architect.
Yes,
Chief architect.
the chief architect does not attend all of these meetings. Usually I would invite that person to all of the sprint reviews, but imagine you have 10 to 15 squads and they have reviews probably at around the same time, so it's a bit difficult, but they can attend the sprint reviews, and that way they can see what is the progress and what are some of the issues. But definitely, otherwise, if you have a lot of engineers, that this person will be attending meetings only and not doing anything else.
Okay, so does it develop too?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Okay, thank you.
The chapter lead is the one who develops like 50% of the time.
Okay, I guess that's all from the questions. Thank you very much for your session.
Thank you.